seemed to be related to the nice sex, but it was different.
And what was different about rough sex?
It was very strange. It was very dark. He turned off the lights. He put candles around the bed and on my nightstand and on my dressers, and he would light them, and he would put the candles in cups, the cups that he would bring from the kitchen, or different plates that were in my bedroom.
In part one, we heard the devastating 911 call that changed everything, witnessed the crime scene that shocked Beverly Hills, and listened to the confession that revealed 2 young men had killed their parents. But the confession also opened a door to something far more complex, a story of survival, trauma, and experiences so disturbing they would divide an entire nation. If you're just joining us for part 2, I strongly encourage you to go back and watch part 1 first. The foundation we built there is crucial to understanding what you're about to hear tonight. What if I told you that the testimony you're about to witness would challenge everything America thought it knew about family, abuse, and the lengths human beings will go to protect themselves? What if I told you that 2 young men would stand in a courtroom and describe experiences so horrific that grown adults would leave the room in tears? What if I told you that their words would force a nation to confront the uncomfortable truth that monsters don't always look like strangers? Sometimes they live in our own homes. Tonight, we're diving into the most controversial and heartbreaking testimony in American legal history. This isn't just about 2 brothers explaining their actions. It's about 2 survivors finding the courage to speak truths that have been buried for years. If you're ready to hear testimony that changed how America talks about family trauma and abuse, make sure you're subscribed to Dark Trail Files and hit that notification bell. This episode contains difficult content, but it's essential viewing for understanding one of the most complex cases in criminal history. Your support helps us continue bringing you these important stories with the depth and respect they deserve. Before we hear these testimonies, it's crucial to understand how trauma affects the developing mind. Dr. Susan Forward, a leading expert in family trauma, explains that children who experience abuse often develop complex survival mechanisms that can seem contradictory to outside observers. When a child's primary caregivers become sources of both love and terror, the psychological impact is profound and lasting. The child's brain struggles to reconcile the need for parental love with the reality of parental harm. This creates what psychologists call traumatic bonding, a connection that is simultaneously protective and destructive. Children in these situations often display what appears to be loyalty to their abusers, even defending them against outside criticism. This isn't weakness or confusion. It's a survival strategy developed by a young mind, trying to make sense of an impossible situation. The child learns that speaking out brings more danger, so silence becomes safety. Dr. Lenore Walker, who pioneered research into abuse cycles, noted that victims often carry shame and self-blame well into adulthood. They internalize the message that they somehow deserve their treatment, that they were responsible for their abuser's actions. This psychological conditioning can last decades, making it incredibly difficult for survivors to speak their truth, even when their lives depend on it. Understanding this framework is essential as we listen to the testimony that follows. These aren't just legal statements. They're the words of individuals who spent years learning to survive in an environment where truth was dangerous and silence was the only protection they knew. What you're about to hear took incredible courage to speak aloud. Lyle Menendez, sitting in a courtroom filled with strangers, cameras, and the weight of the world's judgment, chose to break decades of silence. His words would shock the nation and force America to confront uncomfortable truths about what can happen behind closed doors, even in the most privileged families.
Just started with, after sports practices, he would massage me, and we would have these talks, and he would show me, and he would fondle me, and he would ask me to do the same with him, and I would touch him, and we would undress.
Where would this take place?
In my bedroom.
And how often would this happen?
Like 2 or 3 times a week.
And for how long did this happen?
Not too long. It began to change.
When did it begin to change?
I'm not sure exactly at what time, but almost close to when I was 7.
And how did it change?
Just became more involved.
What do you mean more involved?
We would be in the bathroom, and he would put me on my knees, and he would guide me, all my movements, and I would have oral sex with him.
Did you want to do this? At some point, did he do some other things to you?
Yes.
What else did he do to you?
He used objects.
What kind of objects?
A toothbrush and some sort of shaving utensil brush.
And what would he do with the toothbrush?
Well, in the bedroom, we'd have what we called object sessions.
What we're witnessing here represents one of the most difficult moments in American courtroom history. Lyle Menendez, sitting before a packed courtroom with cameras broadcasting to millions, made the decision to break decades of silence about experiences that had shaped his entire life. Child trauma experts note that male survivors of sexual abuse face unique challenges in disclosure. Society's expectations about masculinity often make it even more difficult for men to speak about these experiences. The shame, confusion, and self-blame that typically accompany such trauma are often amplified by cultural messages about what it means to be strong or male. Lyle's willingness to share these deeply personal and painful memories in such a public forum required extraordinary courage. He knew that every word would be scrutinized, challenged, and judged not just by the jury, but by an entire nation watching on television. Yet he chose to speak his truth, understanding that his life literally depended on being believed. The details he's sharing aren't just legal testimony. They're a window into experiences that fundamentally altered how he understood family, safety, and trust. These are the words of someone who learned very early that the people who should protect you can also be the source of your greatest pain.
And just slide my pants down or take my pants off. Sometimes it would be for a short period of time, sometimes longer. Just lay me on the bed and he'd have a tube of Vaseline and he just played with me.
And was there some point in time when he decided to use something besides the toothbrush?
Yes.
And did he try to anally penetrate you with something else?
He did.
And what was it?
He raped me.
Did you cry?
Yes.
Did you bleed?
Yes.
Were you scared?
Very.
Did you ask him not to?
Yes.
How did you ask him not to?
I just told him, I don't. I'm sorry. I just told him that I didn't want to do this and that it hurt me. And he said that he didn't mean to hurt me. And he loved me.
Was that important to you, that he loved you?
Yes, very. But I still didn't want to do it.
Did you tell your mom?
Yes.
What did you say to your mom?
I told her to tell Dad to leave me alone. And he keeps touching me.
What did your mom say?
She told me to stop it. And that I was exaggerating. And that my dad has to punish me when I do things wrong. And she told me that he loved me.
The consistency of detail in Lyle's testimony reflects what mental health professionals recognize as authentic trauma disclosure. When someone has experienced severe abuse, their memories often contain specific sensory elements, the way things felt, sounded, or smelled, that are extremely difficult to fabricate convincingly. Dr. Judith Herman, a leading trauma researcher, has written extensively about how genuine trauma memories emerge during disclosure. They don't follow neat, chronological patterns. Instead, they come in fragments, with emotional intensity attached to specific moments and details. This fragmented quality isn't a sign of deception. It's exactly how traumatized minds store and retrieve painful experiences. What makes Lyle's testimony particularly powerful is his attempt to help the jury understand not just what happened, but how those experiences affected his psychological development. He's not just describing events. He's explaining how those events taught him about power, control, and survival in a household where the normal rules of family love and protection didn't apply. The courage required to speak these truths publicly while facing potential life imprisonment cannot be understated. This testimony would become a turning point in how America discusses family trauma and the long-term effects of childhood abuse.
Did you ever tell anybody else?
When?
Did you ever tell anybody else when you were a child? You heard Diane Vandermolen testify. Do you
Yes.
remember telling her?
No.
Did you complain to your cousin Alan?
No, not about that.
Just about punishment. As a child, did you ever tell anybody else what had happened with your dad?
Yes. I was a child? No.
Why not?
I was afraid, and my dad didn't want me to.
What did he tell you about telling people?
He just said that it was our secret, that bad things would happen to me if I told anybody. And I told him I never would.
How old were you when this stopped?
8.
So during the time between 6 and 8, when this was going on, did you tell your brother? Did you do something to your brother?
Yes.
What did you do to your brother?
I took him out to the woods. Whenever I felt, I don't know, I took him out sometimes, and I took a toothbrush also, and I played with Erik in the same way. And I'm sorry.
It stopped for you with your dad when you were 8. When you were about 13, did you think that it might be happening to someone else?
Yes,
And who did you think it was happening to?
Erik.
And did you do something about it?
Yes,
What did you do?
I talked to my dad.
What did you say to your dad?
I told him that I knew what was going on with him and Erik, and then I heard noises, and that I wanted him to leave Erik alone.
Lyle's testimony revealed experiences that began when he was just a child, too young to understand what was happening to him, too small to protect himself, and too frightened to tell anyone. His words painted a picture of systematic abuse that went far beyond physical violence. This was psychological warfare waged against a defenseless child by the person who was supposed to protect him. Legal experts noted the specific details in Lyle's testimony. The way he recalled sensory memories, sounds, smells, physical sensations that trauma survivors often carry with startling clarity. These aren't the kind of details that can be fabricated easily. They emerge from genuine memory, often triggered by the stress of reliving traumatic experiences. Child psychologists who analyzed Lyle's testimony pointed out the classic markers of authentic trauma recall. The way his voice changed when describing certain events, the physical responses he displayed, the emotional breaks that occurred at unexpected moments, all consistent with someone accessing genuine traumatic memories that had been suppressed for years. What made Lyle's testimony particularly powerful was his attempt to help the jury understand the psychological impact of these experiences. He wasn't just describing events. He was explaining how those events shaped his understanding of safety, trust, and survival. For a young boy, learning that his father, the person who should represent strength and protection, was actually a source of danger, the psychological impact was devastating and permanent. While Lyle's testimony shocked the courtroom, Erik's words would prove even more difficult to hear. Where Lyle had developed a protective shell of emotional distance, Erik's pain remained raw, immediate, and overwhelming. His testimony would provide a different perspective on the same horrific experiences, showing how abuse affects each victim uniquely, even within the same family.
He was trying to do it to me, but it wasn't working. It was,
When you say it wasn't working, was it hurting?
yes.
So,
All right, the objection is overruled as to that question, but counsel, please refrain from asking leading questions.
okay. How did your father react at that stage to things hurting you?
He was nice about it. He didn't want to hurt me.
So what would he do if something was hurting you? Would he continue to do it? Would he
No, he'd stop.
And did you ever use that wooden thing on yourself when he wasn't around?
No.
Did you know why he wanted you, did he say why he wanted you to use that thing?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
I don't remember exactly what he told me, but I knew why. It was so that I could practice on myself so that it wouldn't hurt anymore when he did.
Now, at some point, did your father stop being nice?
Yes.
Approximately how old were you?
I was 11 years old. It was just after I finished swimming.
What do you mean by finish swimming?
Swimming had ended. I ended swimming, and it was started after that point.
I don't understand what you mean by you ended swimming. Does that mean you...
Swimming had stopped. He had told me that I had to take a certain course in sports. I was either tennis, soccer, or swimming. I just didn't know. It was real confusing. He sat down with me, and he came over to me, and he said, "What sport do you want to play? You have to choose a sport." Because I was 11 years old, and he said I was becoming a man, and it was time to choose a sport. And so I said tennis. Later I found out that he didn't want me to choose tennis, that he wanted me... I blame myself. I thought maybe he wanted me to do swimming. But at the time I thought he wanted me to choose tennis because Lyle had gone into it.
Now, what was it, Mr. Menendez, that happened that made you think that your father was upset with you for having given up swimming?
He wasn't nice anymore during the sex.
You have to put the mic in.
He wasn't nice anymore during the sex.
Now, do you recall the first time that he wasn't nice during the sex?
Yes. Yes.
And you were 11?
I was 11.
The reason you're having trouble is it's not facing you. Face it.
I know. I need to use the restroom. I need a break.
Okay, we'll take a recess, and we'll resume at 3:30, or 2:30, I'm sorry, 2:30, ladies and gentlemen. Don't discuss the case with anyone or form any opinions about it. We'll resume at 2:30. So you may resume your direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Menendez, this particular incident when you were 11, do you remember it?
Yes, very well.
How do you think about this incident in relation to things that happened both before and after?
It's one that just really stands out in my mind.
Is it one of the worst things that happened to you?
Yes.
And thinking about it, do you remember what was happening in the house? Anything you heard?
Erik's testimony reveals a different perspective on the same horrific experiences his brother described. Where Lyle had developed emotional defenses over the years, Erik's pain remains raw and immediate. His words demonstrate how abuse affects each victim uniquely, even within the same household. Mental health professionals who analyzed Erik's testimony noted the authentic markers of trauma disclosure. The way his voice breaks at unexpected moments, the physical responses he can't control, the difficulty finding words for experiences that defy description. These aren't rehearsed statements. They're the spontaneous reactions of someone accessing deeply buried traumatic memories. What's particularly striking about Erik's account is his attempt to help the jury understand the psychological impact of these experiences. He's not just recounting events. He's explaining how those events shaped his understanding of relationships, safety, and his own worth. For a young person, learning that a parent can be both protector and predator creates a psychological contradiction that's almost impossible to resolve. The specificity of Erik's memories, the details about timing, location, and emotional responses reflects how trauma burns certain moments into memory with painful clarity. These aren't the kind of details that fade with time or can be easily fabricated under the intense scrutiny of cross-examination.
Or saw before this incident actually began?
Yes.
What was it that was happening?
I heard some fighting with my parents downstairs.
Who was fighting with your parents?
My mom and my dad were fighting.
Between themselves?
Yes.
Was this a physical altercation or a verbal fight?
I didn't know if it was physical. I just heard the verbal. I just heard them yelling at each other.
Okay. And what happened after you heard them yelling at each other?
I heard my father coming up the stairs.
And what house are you in?
Pennington.
Okay. And what happened when your father got up the stairs?
He came toward my room. All I could think about was him coming toward my room and how I was hoping he wasn't going to do that.
Do what?
Come toward my room.
Why?
Because I didn't want him to come into my room when he was angry.
Even if he was angry at someone else?
Yes.
Did you think that it was going to be something sexual?
No, I didn't think it was going to be something sexual if he was angry at that time.
Okay. What did you think was going to happen if he was angry at that time?
I thought he was just going to take out the belt or hit me or throw me someplace. I didn't know what was going to happen.
Did you know what the topic of the argument was between your mother and father?
No.
Did you have any concerns about what it might have been?
Yeah, I was concerned that it might have been over me.
Had there been arguments in the past over you?
Yes.
And had any of those arguments in the past over you resulted in your father physically hurting you?
Yes, he would get angry with Mom, and they would yell back and forth, and then he'd come to my room and just hit me or whatever.
So, did you think it was possibly one of those episodes about to occur?
Yes, that's what I thought was about to occur.
So, if you could tell us what happened, in fact, when he came into your room on this occasion.
He came into the room and he told me to kneel down on my bed.
Okay.
And I did, and he came over to my bed and threw me off the bed and told me to kneel on the floor. And
You made a sweeping motion with your right hand when you said he...
Yeah, he just threw me with his hand on my arm here.
He took you back on the arm and threw you off the bed
Yes.
and said,
And said for me to get on my knees on the floor. And I was real confused because he had just said to get on my knees on the bed. And so I didn't know what to do.
what did you think was going to happen when he told you to get on your knees on the bed?
I thought it might have been some sort of sex.
Why did you think that?
Because when he told me to get on my knees in the bed, usually what would happen would be for me to have some sort of sex with him, but it was strange because he didn't tell me to take off my clothes. He didn't help me take off my clothes like he used to do. He just told me to kneel on the bed, and I didn't understand why. I didn't know what was going on.
So did you then kneel on the floor as he ordered you to do?
Yes.
And was he dressed?
Yes.
Okay, what happened? First of all, did it hurt when he threw you off the bed?
I hit my head against the wall, but I wasn't thinking about that.
Okay, what happened next?
He was unbuckling his pants, and he pulled out his penis. And in some way, either by his hand on my head or by telling me, he told me he wanted me to massage his penis with my mouth.
And did you do that?
Yes.
And you had done that before?
The emotional intensity we're witnessing in Erik's testimony illustrates something that trauma specialists call re-experiencing. When survivors recall traumatic events, their nervous systems often respond as if the trauma is happening again in the present moment. This isn't dramatic performance. It's a documented physiological response to accessing traumatic memories. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, a renowned trauma researcher, has written extensively about how the body keeps score of traumatic experiences. Even years later, when survivors speak about their trauma, their bodies remember the fear, helplessness, and pain they experienced. This embodied memory is one reason why genuine trauma testimony is so emotionally intense and difficult to witness. Erik's description of living in constant fear, never knowing when the next incident would occur, paints a picture of childhood spent in survival mode. This hypervigilant state doesn't just affect a child's emotional development. It rewires their nervous system around the need for safety. Every interaction becomes a potential threat assessment. Every relationship a question of trust versus danger. What emerges from Erik's words is the portrait of a young person who never learned what normal family relationships looked like. His understanding of love, Authority and safety was fundamentally distorted by experiences that should never happen to any child.
Or hadn't you?
Yes.
Had you ever done it being on the floor on your knees?
No.
Mr. Menendez, is this the beginning of what you came to call knees?
Yes.
And did you call it that because of the position you had to take?
Yes.
And what happened ultimately in this episode?
I had to give him a massage on my knees until he started to have an orgasm.
And had he ever done that before while you were giving him a mouth massage?
No, he had done it, not in my mouth. I was ready to pull away like I'd always done, and then he just came on a towel or a sheet, whatever he had with him. So I was about to pull away because I didn't know what was going to happen because we weren't on a bed and I was just kneeling down. And he said, "No, swallow," and he held my head to him.
And therefore, did he ejaculate in your mouth?
Yes,
And did you swallow?
partly.
And did this upset you?
Yes,
And how did you demonstrate being upset?
I was crying.
And how did he react to your crying?
He pushed me away afterwards.
And did he say or do anything to you afterwards?
Yes.
What did he say or do?
He said, "Why can't you just be like your brother?"
What did that mean?
I thought he just meant, why do I have to cry all the time?
And was he, what was his tone of voice when he said this?
He was rough and he was angry.
Did he at any time at this point use the word embarrassment?
I don't remember him using the word embarrassment. He just started talking about how I wasn't a Menendez and how I was never going to be good enough to be a Menendez and how he was ashamed to have me as a son, and then he said I'd get used to it and left.
And what were you doing while he was saying these things to you?
I was just sitting on the floor crying.
And after he left, what happened?
I went to the door to see if he was still around the corner, and I just went to the bathroom and threw up.
Where was the bathroom in relation to your bedroom?
Just in the middle of the hall,
In the middle between what and what?
between my bedroom and my parents' bedroom.
Back up from the mic a little bit. And you threw up in the bathroom on that occasion?
Yes.
Now, were there other incidents like this one after this incident?
Yes, this is what started to happen all the time. He no longer had me on the bed. He no longer had me sit on the bed between his legs. He no longer had me lie down on the bed. It was just on my knees.
And in addition to your just being on your knees, was his attitude after this different than it had been?
Yes, it changed dramatically.
And how was he from then on?
He was no longer nice. He now yelled at me all the time. He forced me to do things. I had to do whatever he said, and it didn't matter if I complained or if I said no or if I said, "Please stop." He didn't stop. He completely changed.
And when other episodes like this would occur, did you ever throw up after those?
Yes, I threw up almost every time when he would come in my mouth.
Now, how far away from your parents' bedroom was this bathroom where you were throwing up?
8 feet, 10 feet.
And your mother, Mr. Menendez, when you were in the bathroom throwing up because of what your father had done, did your mother ever come to you?
No.
Were there times up until this point in your life, 11 years old, when you had been ill and thrown up?
Yes.
And had you thrown up in that very same bathroom?
Yes.
And when you were ill and threw up, did your mother come in the bathroom?
Yes.
Did she make inquiry?
Yes, she asked me what was wrong.
At any time, Mr. Menendez, from this point on, when you were in that bathroom, throwing up because of sex with your father, did your mother ever come in?
No.
Now, after this incident at 11, did your mother begin to do something peculiar with respect to your body?
Erik's testimony revealed the depth of psychological manipulation that had occurred within the Menendez household. His father hadn't just been physically abusive. He had systematically destroyed Erik's sense of self-worth, autonomy, and safety. The abuse Erik described went beyond violence. It was a comprehensive campaign of psychological control designed to ensure complete submission and silence. Mental health professionals noted that Erik's testimony contained elements that are particularly difficult to fabricate. The emotional fragmentation, the way trauma memories emerge in pieces rather than linear narratives. When someone has experienced severe trauma, their recollection often jumps between different incidents, different emotions, different time periods, as their mind struggles to organize experiences that were fundamentally disorganizing. Erik's description of living with constant fear, of never knowing when the next attack would come, painted a picture of a childhood spent in perpetual survival mode. This isn't just abuse, it's psychological torture inflicted on a developing mind. The long-term effects of such treatment include difficulty trusting others, problems with self-esteem, and a distorted understanding of normal relationships. What emerged from Erik's testimony was a portrait of a young man who had never learned what safety felt like. From his earliest memories, home had been a place of danger, not comfort. His father, who should have been his protector and role model, had instead been his greatest threat. The psychological damage from such betrayal runs deeper than physical wounds and takes far longer to heal. As difficult as the previous testimonies were to hear, what Erik was about to describe would prove even more disturbing. He was about to explain how the abuse escalated from psychological manipulation to physical violence, and eventually to threats that made him fear for his very life. This testimony would be so graphic and disturbing that the judge would warn the courtroom about its content. Erik's description of escalating violence revealed a pattern that abuse experts recognize, but the general public rarely understands. Abuse doesn't typically begin with extreme violence. It starts small and gradually increases, each incident slightly worse than the last. This gradual escalation serves multiple purposes for the abuser. It slowly breaks down the victim's resistance while making each individual incident seem less shocking in context. Dr. Judith Herman, a leading expert in trauma research, has written extensively about this pattern. The abuser uses escalation as a control mechanism, constantly moving the boundaries of what's acceptable while keeping the victim off balance and unable to predict what comes next. The victim learns to be grateful for smaller abuses, relieved when the violence isn't as bad as it could have been. Erik's testimony showed how this escalation affected his psychological development. As the abuse became more severe, his ability to resist or seek help diminished rather than increased. This isn't weakness, it's a documented psychological response to sustained trauma. The victim's sense of agency, their belief in their own power to change their situation, becomes systematically destroyed. The violence Erik described wasn't random or impulsive. It was calculated, designed to maintain control while ensuring silence. His father's threats weren't empty warnings. They were promises backed by a demonstrated willingness to inflict pain. For a young person trapped in this situation, the world becomes divided into two possibilities: submission or escalating violence. What Erik was about to describe would become one of the most discussed moments of the entire trial. This incident would illustrate not just the physical abuse, but the psychological warfare that had become a constant feature of life in the Menendez household. The details he shared would help the jury understand how a young person's entire worldview can be shaped by fear and the constant threat of violence. This incident, while shocking to those hearing it for the first time, represented something that trauma experts see repeatedly in severe abuse cases. The abusers need to demonstrate not just their willingness to inflict pain, but their creativity in finding new ways to terrorize their victim. It's not enough to cause fear. The abuser must constantly escalate the psychological impact to maintain control. Child psychologists who analyzed this testimony noted that such extreme incidents often become defining memories for trauma survivors. These aren't just painful experiences. They become proof to the victim that their abuser is capable of anything, that no boundary exists that won't be crossed. The psychological impact extends far beyond the physical pain of the moment. The incident Erik described would have occurred during crucial developmental years, when a young person is forming their understanding of relationships, power, and safety. Having such an experience with a parental figure doesn't just create fear. It fundamentally alters how that person will view authority, trust, and their own worth for the rest of their lives. Legal experts noted that Erik's description of this incident contained the kind of specific, sensory details that are characteristic of genuine traumatic memory. The way he recalled not just what happened, but how it felt, what he was thinking, what he feared would happen next. These elements are difficult to fabricate and are consistent with authentic trauma recall. What Erik was about to describe would be perhaps the most difficult testimony for many people to hear. This wasn't about physical violence, but about violations that run deeper than physical wounds. His words would force the courtroom, and eventually the nation, to confront forms of abuse that many people struggle even to acknowledge exist. This testimony requires our most careful and respectful attention. The courage required for Erik to speak these words in open court cannot be overstated. Male survivors of sexual abuse face unique challenges in speaking their truth. Society's misconceptions about masculinity and victimization create additional barriers to disclosure. For Erik to overcome not just his own trauma, but these cultural prejudices, while sitting in a courtroom filled with cameras and strangers, represents an extraordinary act of bravery. Dr. Richard Gartner, a leading expert in male sexual trauma, has written extensively about the particular challenges faced by male survivors. The shame and confusion surrounding these experiences are often compounded by societal messages about what it means to be male. Victims often struggle with questions about their own identity, their own responses, and their inability to prevent what was happening to them. The long-term psychological impact of such experiences cannot be understated. This type of abuse doesn't just violate physical boundaries. It distorts a young person's understanding of intimacy, trust, and their own body. The confusion, shame, and self-blame that result can persist for decades, affecting every relationship and every aspect of self-worth. Mental health professionals noted that Erik's testimony contained markers consistent with authentic disclosure of sexual trauma. The difficulty he displayed in finding words, the way certain details emerged only reluctantly, the visible emotional distress, all align with how genuine survivors typically disclose these experiences, especially in high-stress situations like courtroom testimony. As we listen to these testimonies from both brothers, a disturbing pattern emerges that abuse experts recognize, but the general public rarely understands. This wasn't random violence or occasional loss of control. This was systematic abuse designed to maintain complete psychological and physical dominance over two young people. Dr. Alice Miller, a renowned child psychologist, wrote extensively about how children adapt to abusive environments. The victim learns to read subtle cues, to anticipate danger, to modify their behavior in hopes of preventing the next attack. But in severely abusive households, there is no behavior that guarantees safety. The abuse continues regardless of the child's attempts to comply or please. Both Lyle and Erik described learning to live in a state of constant hypervigilance, never knowing when the next attack would come, always scanning for danger signals. This isn't just fear. It's a complete reorganization of the nervous system around the need for survival. Children in these situations develop what researchers call complex trauma, which affects not just their emotional development, but their ability to form relationships, regulate emotions, and trust their own perceptions. The testimonies revealed that both brothers had learned the same painful lesson. Speaking out would only make things worse. Their father had systematically trained them to believe that silence was their only protection, that telling anyone would result in even more severe consequences. This psychological conditioning explains why they never sought help, never told teachers or friends, never called police. They had been taught that doing so would only increase their danger. The pattern that emerges from their testimonies is one that trauma experts see repeatedly in severe abuse cases. Escalating violence, increasing isolation, systematic destruction of the victim's sense of agency, and the creation of a psychological prison where the victim becomes complicit in their own silence. What becomes clear from both testimonies is that the murders weren't the result of a single incident or sudden decision. They were the culmination of years of escalating abuse, growing desperation, and the gradual erosion of any hope that their situation would improve. Both brothers described reaching a point where they genuinely believed their lives were in danger. Psychologists who specialize in extreme trauma cases note that when individuals have been systematically abused over many years, their perception of threat becomes highly attuned. They may recognize danger signals that others would miss, but they may also interpret situations as life-threatening when other solutions might exist. The constant state of fear and hypervigilance changes how the brain processes information and assesses options. The testimonies revealed that both brothers had reached a psychological breaking point where they felt trapped with no possibility of escape. Their father's threats had become more explicit, their fear more acute, and their sense of options more limited. In their minds, they faced a choice between killing or being killed, a perception that may have been distorted by years of trauma, but felt absolutely real to them in that moment. This doesn't excuse what they did, but it helps explain the psychological state that led to such a desperate choice. Both brothers described feeling that they had exhausted all other possibilities, that no one would believe them if they spoke out, and that their father's power and influence would protect him while leaving them more vulnerable than ever. The tragedy is that two young men who should have been looking forward to their futures instead felt so trapped and terrorized that they saw violence as their only escape. Their testimonies paint a picture of individuals who had been systematically broken down over many years, reaching a point where their capacity for hope, trust, and clear thinking had been severely compromised. The testimonies we've heard tonight force us to confront uncomfortable truths about family dynamics and the nature of abuse itself. Both brothers described experiences that go far beyond the physical violence most people imagine when they think of child abuse. They painted a picture of systematic psychological warfare designed to maintain complete control while ensuring absolute silence. These testimonies divided the nation when they were first broadcast. Some viewers saw authentic pain and trauma that explained, if not excused, the brothers' actions. Others questioned whether such personal revelations could ever justify what happened that night in Beverly Hills. The debate continues to this day, reflecting our society's ongoing struggle to understand the complex relationship between trauma and behavior. What we cannot deny is the courage it took for both young men to speak these truths in open court, knowing they would be challenged, analyzed, and judged by millions of people. Whether you believe their accounts or question their motives, the act of speaking about such personal trauma in such a public forum represents an extraordinary display of vulnerability and strength. The testimony you've heard tonight represents some of the most difficult and important content ever presented in an American courtroom. But the story isn't complete. In part 3, we'll examine another layer of this complex case, testimony about their mother's role in this family tragedy. Make sure you're subscribed to Dark Trail Files and have notifications turned on, because the final part of this series will reveal additional complexities that further challenge our understanding of this case. But there was another abuser in the house, and her role in this tragedy would prove just as devastating and just as controversial as everything we've heard tonight.